Listen carefully. Across history, cultures have wrestled with the idea of divine selection, the sense that certain individuals are called rather than randomly elevated. This concept appears in religious texts, philosophical reflection, and psychological theory, often emphasizing purpose over preference. In biblical narratives, figures such as Moses, the prophets, or the apostles are not portrayed as inherently superior. They are frequently reluctant, flawed, or socially marginal. Their selection is framed as a summons to responsibility, to speak, guide, or bear witness under difficult conditions. The call disrupts ordinary life and imposes moral obligation rather than granting status. Importantly, many stories emphasize resistance to the call, reinforcing that divine selection is not about personal ambition. Philosophical traditions approach the idea through vocation and telos. Thinkers from Plato to existentialists have explored the notion that individuals may feel oriented toward particular ethical or existential tasks. Here, being called does not imply metaphysical favoritism, but alignment with a role that serves a broader good. The emphasis lies on coherence between inner conscience and outward action, not on hierarchy. In depth psychology, particularly in Jungian thought, a comparable idea appears in the concept of individuation. Some individuals experience a strong internal pressure to differentiate from collective norms. This is not seen as superiority, but as a psychological necessity to integrate unconscious material and live authentically. Such individuals often report heightened empathy, deep introspection, moral tension, and discomfort with shallow conformity. These traits can feel burdensome, producing isolation or self-doubt rather than confidence. Across these perspectives, feeling set apart is not treated as a reward. Instead, it reflects an internal demand to carry meaning, awareness, or ethical weight. Feeling different or out of sync with the world can therefore be interpreted not only as alienation, but as a signal of purpose that has yet to be articulated. Taken together, these traditions suggest that divine attention, however one understands it, rarely manifests as privilege. More often, it operates quietly through pressure, constraint, and the persistent demand to respond responsibly rather than comfortably. Across cultures and historical narratives, perceived destiny is rarely accompanied by immediacy or ease. Instead, it is often marked by struggle, prolonged waiting, and periods of isolation. Rather than functioning as evidence of misalignment or failure, these experiences can be understood as shaping forces that prepare individuals for roles or responsibilities that require psychological depth, endurance, and discernment. From a psychological perspective, adversity plays a central role in the development of resilience. Resilience theory emphasizes that the capacity to adapt under stress is not merely an inborn trait, but is cultivated through repeated exposure to manageable difficulty. When individuals encounter obstacles without immediate resolution, they are compelled to develop coping strategies, emotional regulation, and cognitive flexibility. These capacities are especially relevant for people who perceive their lives as oriented toward long-term purpose rather than short-term reward. The waiting itself becomes formative, reinforcing patience and internal stability. Meaning-making theory further clarifies why hardship frequently accompanies a sense of destiny. Humans are not shaped only by events, but by the interpretations they construct around those events. Individuals who frame difficulty as part of a larger narrative are more likely to extract coherence from chaos. Research in this area suggests that people who perceive their suffering as meaningful tend to exhibit greater psychological integration and lower existential distress over time. For those with a strong sense of calling, delays and setbacks often become material through which meaning is refined, even when clarity is not immediately available. Post-traumatic growth offers additional insight. This framework does not claim that suffering is inherently beneficial, but observes that under certain conditions, adversity can lead to increased self-understanding, moral sensitivity, and relational depth. Individuals who endure prolonged uncertainty often report shifts in values, priorities, and identity. They may become less motivated by external validation and more anchored in internal conviction. Such changes are particularly relevant to perceived destiny, which often demands sustained commitment without external reinforcement. A recurring pattern among individuals who feel oriented toward a specific purpose is the experience of delay. Psychologically, delays can function as tests of motivation and authenticity. When progress is slow, superficial or externally imposed goals tend to lose their hold, while deeply internalized commitments persist. Inner conflict often emerges during this phase, as individuals oscillate between doubt and conviction. This tension can be destabilizing, but it also exposes unexamined assumptions, unresolved fears, and unrealistic expectations. Through this process, purpose becomes less idealized and more grounded. Isolation frequently accompanies this developmental arc. Social psychology suggests that divergence from dominant norms often leads to feelings of separation, particularly when an individual's values or pace of development do not align with their immediate environment. While isolation is not inherently beneficial and can be psychologically risky, limited periods of solitude can create space for reflection, self-assessment, and consolidation of identity. For individuals navigating perceived destiny, reduced external noise can clarify internal signals, even if the experience is uncomfortable. Importantly, these processes should not be interpreted as endorsements of suffering. Psychological research consistently shows that excessive or unbuffered hardship can be damaging. The functional role of struggle lies not in its intensity, but in its capacity to prompt adaptation, reflection, and reorganization when adequate support or internal resources are present. Preparation does not require constant pain, but it often involves friction between who a person is and who they are becoming. The idea of delayed timing can also be understood through the lens of internal versus external change. Observable outcomes tend to lag behind internal transformation. Skills such as discernment, emotional regulation, ethical consistency, and disciplined attention develop gradually and are not immediately visible. When individuals focus primarily on external milestones, this internal work can feel like stagnation. From a psychological standpoint, however, internal restructuring often precedes sustainable external action. In this sense, perceived divine timing may feel slow, not because progress is absent, but because the most significant changes are occurring beneath the surface. Identity consolidation, value clarification, and psychological readiness cannot be rushed without compromising stability. What appears as delay may function as calibration, ensuring that when movement occurs, it is coherent and enduring. Within this framework, struggle, waiting, and isolation do not negate the possibility of destiny. They operate as mechanisms of refinement, shaping perception, capacity, and commitment. Delay does not erase purpose, but alters its expression, depth, and durability in ways that become intelligible only over time. Across historical, religious, and psychological narratives, perceived destiny is rarely portrayed as a straight path marked by immediacy or ease. Instead, it is frequently accompanied by struggle, extended waiting, and periods of isolation. These conditions are often interpreted as signs of misalignment or failure, yet psychological theory suggests they can function as shaping forces that prepare individuals for roles requiring clarity, endurance, and disciplined judgment rather than impulse or entitlement. Resilience theory helps explain why difficulty so often appears alongside a sense of purpose. Resilience is not simply the ability to endure hardship, but the capacity to adapt, reorganize, and maintain coherence under stress. Research shows that resilience develops through repeated encounters with challenge that demand problem-solving, emotional regulation, and patience. For individuals who perceive their lives as oriented toward long-term meaning, delays and obstacles may cultivate precisely these capacities. Waiting becomes an active psychological process, forcing the development of self-regulation and tolerance for uncertainty rather than reliance on immediate outcomes. Meaning-making theory further clarifies how hardship can function constructively. Human beings are driven to integrate experiences into narratives that provide coherence and purpose. When adversity is interpreted as random or punitive, it often leads to despair. When it is interpreted as part of a larger trajectory, it can deepen self-understanding and commitment. Individuals with a strong sense of destiny are often engaged, consciously or unconsciously, in ongoing meaning-making. Delays and setbacks compel them to examine motives, refine goals, and distinguish between imagined outcomes and authentic purpose. This process does not eliminate doubt, but it can produce a more grounded and internally consistent sense of direction. Post-traumatic growth theory adds nuance to this dynamic by emphasizing that adversity does not automatically lead to growth, nor is suffering itself beneficial. Instead, growth may occur when individuals reflect on disruption and reorganize their values, priorities, or identity. Prolonged struggle often destabilizes superficial sources of meaning, such as status or external validation, pushing individuals toward deeper forms of motivation. For those who perceive a calling or destiny, this can result in increased discipline, moral clarity, and psychological depth, qualities that are difficult to acquire without friction. A notable pattern among individuals with a strong sense of destiny is the experience of prolonged delay. Psychologically, delay functions as a filter. Goals that are rooted primarily in fantasy, ego reinforcement, or social comparison often erode under sustained waiting. Commitments that persist despite frustration tend to be more deeply internalized. This is why delay is frequently accompanied by inner conflict. Individuals may oscillate between confidence and doubt, hope and resignation. These tensions expose unresolved fears, unrealistic expectations, and unexamined assumptions, creating pressure for psychological maturation rather than passive endurance. Repeated tests of patience serve a similar function. Patience is not merely tolerance of inconvenience, but the capacity to sustain effort without immediate reinforcement. Developing this capacity requires repeated encounters with frustration that cannot be bypassed through force or speed. For individuals oriented toward destiny, such tests can recalibrate their relationship to time, effort, and control. The process often dismantles the expectation that purpose should unfold quickly or visibly, replacing it with a more durable orientation toward process rather than outcome. Isolation is another common feature of this developmental arc. Social psychology suggests that individuals whose values, pace, or priorities diverge from their environment often experience periods of social disconnection. While prolonged isolation can be harmful, limited or situational solitude can create space for introspection and identity consolidation. Reduced external feedback forces individuals to rely more heavily on internal reference points, clarifying what genuinely matters to them. For those navigating perceived destiny, this can strengthen internal alignment, even if it feels disorienting at the time. It is essential to avoid interpreting these patterns as endorsements of suffering. Psychological research consistently shows that unrelenting or unsupported hardship can erode well-being. The functional role of struggle lies not in its severity, but in its capacity to prompt adaptation, reflection, and reorganization when internal or external resources are available. Preparation does not require constant pain, but it often involves sustained effort under conditions that resist quick resolution. The idea that divine timing feels slow can be understood through the distinction between internal and external change. Internal transformations such as value clarification, emotional regulation, ethical consistency, and disciplined attention develop gradually and are not immediately observable. External outcomes tend to lag behind these internal shifts. When individuals focus solely on visible milestones, internal progress may feel like stagnation, even as significant restructuring is taking place beneath the surface. Within this framework, struggle, waiting, and isolation are not signs that destiny has been abandoned or denied. They function as mechanisms of refinement, shaping perception, capacity, and commitment over time. Delay does not negate destiny, but alters its form and depth, refining it into something more stable, coherent, and resilient than it could have been otherwise. Believing oneself to be divinely chosen carries significant psychological risks, particularly when the belief is held without critical reflection or ethical grounding. While the idea of calling or destiny can provide meaning and direction, it can also distort self-perception and judgment if it becomes fused with identity in an unexamined way. Psychology and philosophy both caution that meaning systems, when inflated, can shift from orientation toward responsibility into justification for ego and exception. One of the most well-documented risks is ego inflation. When an individual interprets inner conviction as evidence of special status, the belief can reinforce grandiosity rather than purpose. From a psychological standpoint, this mirrors patterns seen in narcissistic self-structures, where self-worth becomes contingent on being exceptional rather than being accountable. Spiritual language can intensify this process, providing symbolic reinforcement that shields beliefs from critique. The individual may begin to equate disagreement or limitation with persecution, further insulating the belief from reality testing. Closely related is spiritual narcissism, a term used to describe the appropriation of moral or spiritual concepts to enhance self-image rather than ethical behavior. In this pattern, the idea of being chosen becomes less about obligation and more about identity elevation. Compassion may be selectively applied, humility replaced by certainty, and complexity reduced to simplistic moral hierarchies. Philosophically, this represents a shift from virtue ethics, which emphasizes character and responsibility, to a form of moral exceptionalism that erodes genuine ethical restraint. Confirmation bias further compounds these risks. Humans naturally seek information that reinforces existing beliefs and discount evidence that challenges them. When someone believes their path is divinely sanctioned, ambiguous experiences may be interpreted as validation, while failures or contradictions are reframed as tests imposed on the righteous. Psychological research shows that strong belief systems can become self-sealing, meaning they reinterpret all outcomes as proof. This dynamic makes discernment difficult, particularly when the belief carries emotional or existential weight. In contrast, accounts of authentic calling across philosophy, theology, and psychology tend to emphasize humility rather than certainty. Existential philosophers argue that genuine purpose is inseparable from responsibility and anxiety, not entitlement. To recognize a task as meaningful is simultaneously to recognize one's limitations in fulfilling it. This awareness often produces doubt, self-questioning, and restraint, not superiority. From this perspective, doubt is not a weakness of purpose, but a sign of ethical seriousness. Psychological studies on moral development support this view. Higher levels of moral reasoning are associated with the ability to tolerate ambiguity, consider multiple perspectives, and accept accountability for consequences. Individuals who perceive their lives as purpose-driven but remain psychologically healthy often show heightened self-scrutiny rather than inflated self-regard. They are more likely to ask whether their actions align with ethical principles than to assume moral immunity based on intention alone. The distinction between authentic calling and self-aggrandizing belief often lies in orientation. Authentic calling tends to be outward-facing, concerned with contribution, repair, or service. Self-aggrandizing belief is inward-facing, preoccupied with identity, recognition, or exemption from ordinary constraints. Philosophers such as Kant emphasized that moral worth arises from duty freely accepted, not from perceived favor or reward. In this framework, any notion of divine attention would increase the weight of responsibility, not reduce it. The idea that divine attention confers privilege is psychologically seductive, but ethically fragile. If one assumes exemption from ordinary accountability, moral reasoning becomes distorted. In contrast, many theological traditions emphasize that being entrusted with purpose intensifies scrutiny rather than diminishes it. Accountability expands in proportion to perceived responsibility. This interpretation aligns with psychological findings that sustainable purpose is linked to self-regulation, empathy, and willingness to accept consequences. Safeguards against distortion, therefore, become essential. Discernment requires ongoing self-questioning, openness to feedback, and willingness to revise interpretations. Ethical responsibility demands that claims of purpose be evaluated by their effects on others, not merely by internal conviction. Humility functions not as self-denial, but as a corrective against over-identification with one's narrative. Philosophy consistently warns that meaning detached from ethical restraint devolves into ideology rather than purpose. A mature understanding of destiny emerges when calling is framed not as elevation above others, but as obligation toward them. Purpose, in this sense, is less about who one is than about what one is willing to carry, protect, or repair. When destiny is understood as service rather than status, the psychological risks of inflation diminish, and the focus shifts from entitlement to responsibility, from certainty to care, and from self-concept to sustained ethical action. Living in alignment with a sense of personal destiny, without falling into delusion or dependency, requires practical grounding rather than heightened belief. Destiny, when approached psychologically and ethically, is not something to be claimed or proven, but something to be enacted quietly through sustained choices. The risk is not having a sense of purpose, but allowing that sense to detach from self-awareness, responsibility, and reality. Self-awareness is the first stabilizing factor. This involves an ongoing willingness to examine motives, limitations, and emotional needs without spiritualizing them prematurely. Many people confuse intensity of feeling with truth, or desire with direction. Psychological grounding requires distinguishing between what feels meaningful and what is actually sustainable, ethical, and beneficial. Self-awareness also includes recognizing vulnerability to bias, projection, and wish fulfillment. A grounded orientation toward destiny accepts that inner conviction must remain in dialogue with reflection, feedback, and lived consequences. Ethical action provides the second anchor. Purpose that remains internal or symbolic is prone to distortion. Purpose that is translated into ethical behavior becomes accountable. Ethics shift destiny from abstraction to practice. Rather than asking whether one is chosen, the more stabilizing question becomes whether one's actions reduce harm, increase understanding, or contribute constructively to shared life. This orientation discourages entitlement and replaces it with obligation. Purpose matures when it is measured not by intensity of belief, but by consistency of conduct. Contribution further grounds destiny in reality. Contribution does not require visibility or recognition. It requires usefulness. Psychology consistently shows that meaning is strengthened when individuals perceive their actions as having tangible value for others. This does not imply self-sacrifice without boundaries, but it does require moving beyond self-referential narratives. When destiny is framed as contribution, it naturally resists fantasy. Fantasies center on identity and outcome. Contribution centers on effort and effect. The former seeks reassurance, the latter accepts responsibility. Internal discipline is equally essential. Discipline here does not mean rigidity or self-punishment, but the capacity to act in alignment with values even when motivation fluctuates. Destiny expressed through discipline becomes less dramatic, but more durable. It shows up in habits, attentional control, emotional regulation, and willingness to persist without constant validation. Psychological research on self-determination emphasizes that autonomy and competence are built through repeated, often unremarkable actions. Destiny, in this sense, is not something one waits for, but something one practices. Framing destiny as a series of consistent choices rather than a defining moment protects against dependency on signs, symbols, or external affirmation. When people rely on reassurance, whether divine, social, or emotional, they risk outsourcing responsibility for their lives. Coherence becomes a more reliable indicator than confirmation. Coherence refers to the alignment between stated values, daily behavior, and actual impact on others. When these elements align over time, purpose becomes observable rather than imagined. This approach also clarifies why purpose is not confirmed by praise or recognition. External validation can accompany meaningful work, but it is an unreliable metric. Praise often reflects social preferences rather than ethical substance. A grounded orientation toward destiny tolerates obscurity and ambiguity, focusing instead on whether one's actions remain faithful to core values under varying conditions. Philosophy has long emphasized that integrity is tested most clearly when reinforcement is absent. Encouraging clarity over fantasy means resisting the urge to dramatize one's life narrative. Fantasy simplifies complexity and accelerates meaning. Clarity accepts slowness and uncertainty. Psychological maturity involves tolerating not knowing exactly how one's efforts will matter while continuing to act responsibly anyway. This stance reduces anxiety and inflation simultaneously. Destiny becomes less about proving significance and more about maintaining alignment. Responsibility replaces reassurance as the guiding principle. Rather than seeking signs that one is on the right path, responsibility asks what is required now. This shifts attention from identity to action, from outcome to process. Over time, this orientation naturally shapes character. Integrity develops not through declaration, but through repetition. Depth emerges not from intensity, but from endurance. When lived this way, a sense of calling does not demand belief from others, nor constant confirmation from within. It becomes evident gradually through the texture of a life shaped by care, discipline, and ethical attention. If someone is truly aligned with a deeper purpose, it will not need to announce itself. It will be reflected in how they choose, how they respond to difficulty, and how their presence affects the world around them, leaving room for reflection rather than certainty.